This is EWA Radio, the official podcast of the Education Writers Association, and I'm Public Editor Emily Richmond. Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis hasn't given many interviews since joining the president's cabinet, with one notable exception: a lengthy Q&A with Teddy Fischer, a soon-to-be junior at Mercer Island High School in Washington State. Teddy joins us today, along with the immediate past editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, Jane Gormley, who collaborated on the interview. Teddy, welcome to EWA Radio.
Hi, welcome.
And Jane, we're glad you're here as well.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So, Teddy, this started when Secretary Mattis's cell phone number accidentally was visible in a photograph in the Washington Post. You read about it, you got the number, and then what?
I called him to see if it was him, and then I texted him asking for an interview. And I said who I was, gave my grade, school paper, my position on the paper, and that was it. And then he just called back.
And when he called back, you were in journalism class?
Yes. And then I handed the phone to my friend because I was very scared.
You recognized the number?
Yeah, for some reason I put his name into my contacts, so it just appeared on my screen as like Jim M or something weird.
Yeah, I think I would have been a little scared too. So you mentioned that you were still getting questions approved. What were the ground rules for this interview?
I think there weren't really any. Teddy he was the one who set it up, and so he worked with me, and we opened it up to the class, but I don't think we got many questions from that. I think it was mostly between us and our advisor, and it was really just what we were interested in. I think that we were kind of driven by, once the interview was secured, we knew that Teddy wanted to do a policy article, and then I wanted to do a reflection, so we kind of split the questions up that way, and then worked with our advisor to get them ready.
And were there any questions that you sort of thought maybe were risky, or that you were surprised he answered?
One that I thought I was surprised he answered was the NATO question. I asked him why Trump was so hard on NATO countries when he was asking them to pay more. And he said that both administrations prior, the Bush and Obama administrations, were trying to do the same thing. It's just that Trump said it in a much more bluntly and more publicly about countries having to pay up and not paying their fair share.
He was really very open with you in his responses, and the interview was supposed to be about 15 minutes. It ended up going how long? About 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the phone for 45.
And we had really only planned for about 10. We had questions. I mean, of course, we had questions prepared, but then once the interview kept going, Teddy kept going, and he came up with some really good questions on the spot that I think we discussed the content of them, but not how to phrase them. So he did a really good job of putting that together.
The Secretary spoke at some length about the connection between education and radicalization, and he offered some concrete examples of ways that things like school exchange programs might help improve U.S. relations with countries which have very different cultures and politics than what we have. Talk to me a little bit about that, Teddy.
Well, I think his theory is that education is the fundamental key to eliminating radicalization in the Middle East. And he theorized that if youth were given the opportunity to be educated in a more liberal society, they would embrace the opportunity to be shown a more inclusive society, and it would eliminate it would give students better hope for the future if they were educated, a better opportunity for getting jobs, better opportunity of contributing instead of going to these terror groups to get paid. It would have a future.
So I want you to take off your student journalist hats for a second and put on American high schooler hats, if you will. What did you think about that idea?
Well, I was just surprised to hear from him because he's a Marine and someone who thinks like a military general. I would just say that I think it's definitely a new approach. I think it's one that we have to have, especially because nothing's really worked in the Middle East. These terror groups have proven to, despite heavy military losses, facing a vastly superior force, have proven that they can still get people to join their side through recruiting, and that's because they advertise themselves to people who are outcasts and people who don't really have a chance, and people who need to make money for their families. I think I read somewhere that there are a lot of people, I think most people who join those kinds of groups agree with their ideologies and are radicalized in a way that they do believe in the same things that that group believes, but there's also a population of people who are there for the money. And that's a very real thing, especially in Africa and the Middle East. You can get paid to do jobs for these kinds of groups, and for some people it's the only way to make money. So I would agree with him that education can help prevent that and much more effectively than bullets can.
We're talking with Teddy Fischer and Jane Gormley of Mercer Island High School about their interview with Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis. Don't miss an episode of EWA Radio. You never have to. You can find us on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and to rate us on iTunes. Your support and feedback will help us grow. Jane, I want to turn to you for a moment. As the immediate past editor-in-chief of the student newspaper, I took a look through some back issues, great content. I noticed on the senior map, the college map, that you are headed to Washington University in St. Louis.
Yeah, next fall.
Are you planning to study journalism?
I'm definitely going to join the paper, student life, but I don't know about studying it. I think that after this experience, it's journalism has always been something that I considered, but wasn't considering very seriously. But I think after this, it's given me a lot of hope then that this is something I could do.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I hate to tell you guys, you may have peaked a little bit early.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I want to talk about this because you've also had an experience some journalists never have over an entire lifetime of a career, and that is you've become the subject of a story. What have you learned from that, Teddy?
Just to be daring. I would say that if you ask politely, most people will answer your call or your questions, especially if you can continue to press them, but be respectful at the same time. Just don't be afraid to ask anybody anything, even if they seem like a distant figure or more powerful than you. Most people are humble and respectful and appreciate genuine conversation and being listened to. So I think that's what I've learned.
And Jane, what are you taking away from it?
Yeah, I think definitely the same thing as Teddy, but I think more on the side of how it feels to be the subject of the story is I've learned some great scheduling skills with putting together interviews, and being on the other side of interviews really is a different perspective. And having such a big story is a different, having done the story is just so, knowing that your work, I think when we were putting this story together, we knew that it was something, at least I knew it was something that was probably going to get picked up. I don't think we thought it would get this big, but that it would get a lot of attention. And that was really the first time that I think either of us had put together a story that we really thought were going to get a lot of eyes on it. And so having to prepare everything with that kind of looming over your head was a really interesting and I think a really good experience.
Is there a question you haven't been asked about this experience that you'd love to answer?
I think we always love to have the opportunity to thank Secretary Mattis for giving us the opportunity to have this experience. And that hasn't always come up. But I think towards the beginning of this experience, we were trying to push the idea that we didn't want the story to be about us getting the story, but rather the content of the story. But I think that recently, as kind of the initial press has died down, I think that people really have focused in on that, and I think we've really appreciated that.
Sort of the novelty has worn off, and now people are focusing on the work rather than the reporters behind it.
Right. I think that we're really proud of the questions, and we're really proud of the not just the transcript, but the 2 articles that came out of it. And I think I'm glad that I'm seeing more and more outlets taking our reporting seriously. Not just, I think they always have, but really looking at it without the lens of high schoolers being the ones behind it.
Teddy, you said this experience has taught you that you have to be brave to be a journalist. I'm wondering, what's your next big assignment? Who are you planning to talk to next?
Anyone who wants to talk. I don't know. I don't know if this can even be followed up. I don't know if journalism's in my future yet. But I have felt a little guilty about my age because I think that he responded to me because I said I was a student in high school. Every day I've really been wondering what he would have done if it was a mainstream reporter who reached out to him. I think maybe he might have responded because I think he respected the fact that I took it upon myself to ask for an interview. But I don't know what's next after this. This is kind of like once in a lifetime opportunity.
Well, I have some good news for you, Teddy. You don't need to know yet.
Agreed.
Teddy Fischer is a soon-to-be junior at Mercer Island High School in Washington State, and Jane Gormley is a recent graduate, and she's headed to Washington University. Good luck to both of you in the fall, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of EWA Radio, the official podcast of the Education Writers Association. EWA's mission is to strengthen the community of education writers and improve the quality of education coverage to better inform the public. For more than 70 years, EWA has worked to help journalists get the story right. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you soon.